Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on wellbeing, which is a collaboration between the NZIOB and ScienceSafe. My name is Malcolm Fleming, the Chief Executive of the NZIOB. Today's webinar is the third that we have run on wellbeing over the past 2 weeks, and the second that features Dr. Cole McWilliams. Today's webinar is titled Back to Work, but Not Back to Normal. This webinar will explore leadership now that we are back at work, by operating under restrictions and in some cases with some anxiety. Given that this is the second day of work under COVID-19 level 3, we wanted to tailor this session to respond to the key issues that the audience has faced yesterday, the first day that the country was at level 3. Late yesterday afternoon, we sent a short 1-question survey to today's attendees. We received 33 responses, which provided a broad range of challenges that leaders on site faced yesterday. That feedback has effectively framed the approach that Kyle will take with today's webinar. We have quite a bit of material to get through, so I'll keep the welcome short. I just wanted to let you know about 2 webinars that we have next week. Next Wednesday at 12 p.m, we'll be running our 4th wellbeing webinar and the second to be curated by our colleagues at ScienceSafe. Our 3rd contracts webinar with Minter Ellison Rudd Watts has been confirmed for next Thursday at 12 p.m. This webinar will focus on consultants, with Janine Stewart being joined by a colleague, Scott Thompson. Enjoy today's webinar. Please ask questions via the platform's Q&A function. I will return after Cole's presentation to present those questions to him. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the support of JIB, the NZIOB's national partner, with whose assistance today's webinar has been possible. Over to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Malcolm. Hopefully you can hear me. Just let me know that you can. So that's all good. Wonderful. Well, you're no longer in the waiting place, are you? Some of you will know this book from Dr. Seuss and talks about the waiting place. And you're just waiting and waiting. For some of us, that's where we've been over the last month, isn't it? Just waiting. But now you're not, you're moving forward. I heard a neat metaphor the other day, one that you all have heard, but not possibly the end of it. And it says that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not a train coming. I think a month ago we thought it might have been a train coming. It's not a train coming, it's the sun. So I think that's a great place to be. And if you're back at work, I think that's magnificent. All on site where you are. You're moving forward, the sun is shining, and acknowledging that it's not without its challenges. So there's certainly some challenges with that, and we'll look at that today. Thanks also for the responses, Malcolm said, to the survey. 3 key themes, I think, emerged, and Malcolm, you might ask some questions if I miss any in the final part of the session. 3 key themes, I think. One was social distancing. How to maintain that, the complacency of people with that, and then what to do with visitors to the sites or to different sites, how you address that. Whenever I mention social distancing, I think just tag on hygiene and tracing as well. So whatever I say about distancing, I think hygiene will be the same, and tracing. The second key thing that came up was how people are responding going back to work. And as I've discussed soon, there's a massive variability in that. Some people are really excited. Some are just wanting to connect and talk all day, not actually do much. Some are really anxious and fearful about getting sick and fearful about what the future might hold. And then there are varying levels of motivation. We have some people who have what I call goal obsession, who are just wanting to go and get started and do stuff. And then there are others who are in that slow mode. I haven't had to get up early. I haven't had to do much throughout the day, and I'm very slow. So how do I ramp up? So wide variety of how people are responding. And then the final area was productivity. How do we achieve productivity with these new procedures and in the new context? How do we do it when people just want to talk? And also there are client demands occurring as well. So 3 things I want to cover today. The first is a model that I shared last time, And this model applies just as much today as it did a fortnight ago for those of you who attended. And that's about being flexible and being deliberate. Second, I want to cover the role of the leader and some things that you might choose to focus on. And then the third thing, productivity, including some innovation in there. So let me just share this model. If I can find that. And some of you will have seen this last time. And this model is called the Ode C model. So it's not an ode to Corona or COVID. It is an ode to, I think, how people are responding to that. So let me just bring that up and see if I can move that forward. There we go. So Ode C process. So you can apply this model to any context you're in, any time it will help you move forward. And for those of you, say, who are here, this look. And what I'd invite you to do if you've seen this before is just look and say, how does this now apply to now? So the first part of that is being open to the current context. And that's being open to what's going on up here, being open to what you're experiencing and all of those human emotions and human experiences that we just described about what people are seeing. The way that you planned this a few days ago to be on site is not what's going to be occurring. But there's going to be some differences. It's not going to be exactly the same. So it's being open to what things are at this moment, either generically or specifically to a context for some issue that you're facing or some challenge that's in front of you. And then being really deliberate in the decision that you make now. So if you're on site and if you're leading a group of people or you have a task to do, what is the deliberate decision you can make right now, given the context that you are facing? So autopilot is not something we want to be doing over the next few days. We don't want to be just trucking along and being autopilot. We want to be really open, really noticing, and then being very deliberate about what it is you choose to do. A couple of the questions that we received, one or two of them were about PPE and not having enough hand sanitizer. And I don't have an answer for what you can do with that. I don't have an answer. What I can do, though, is suggest that you apply this Ode C model. Because what you can do is be open to the context that you don't have enough PPE or you don't have enough hand sanitizer. And then in your context, you can make a deliberate decision. And now you've got choice, because that deliberate decision might be, we've got some workarounds that we can do. Or the deliberate might be that we actually can't do the task safely at this moment. But now you've got options with that deliberateness. And so you can be deliberate in the context that you're in. The next part of that is being empathetic. Being back at work is going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging on yourself. It's going to be challenging on others. So it's being empathetic to yourself, being kind to yourself and compassionate to yourself, and being kind and compassionate to others. When I've worked with people over the last month, both large groups and individuals, and both senior and not so senior in organisations, the absolute feedback and the observation that I've had is that people have been very hard on themselves. This is not a time to be hard on yourself. This is a time to actually be generous and kind to yourself. And if you're being kind to a mate, what would that look like? And then you can turn that around to yourself. And you can certainly be kind to your colleagues. Again, some of us are going to be working with people when we haven't worked with people for a month. So that's going to provide some challenges and frustrations. So being open and empathetic to those people. And then whatever you're doing, being in a really calm, measured state forward. If you can be calm and deliberate or very calm, that's going to, one, help people follow you, but it's also going to set things forward. So hopefully I'm out of there and hopefully you can see me back. Just get that back, thank you. So it's about being open. So that's the model that I would suggest that you apply. And again, you can apply that in any context, anywhere, regardless of where things are at. I'd like to cover the role of the leader. And I think there are three key areas in this. The first is people. The second is being visible, and then communication on that as well. So the first is people, and again, we mentioned this right at the start, wasn't it? And it was really neat that this was the feedback that people provided about the wide variability, because that's what you're going to get. You're going to get massive variability on how people are responding. This is going to be a complex response, and responses you're going to see is going to be rich, and it's going to be contradictory in some cases, and it's not going to be a binary. It's not going to be that some people are doing really well and others are struggling. It's not going to be a nice sweet sugar drink that some people are doing absolutely beautifully, or a milk-free bitter coffee over on this side. It's going to be a really rich mixture and a rich soup. And people are going to be experiencing everything. I had a senior person the other day who was describing it just for themselves as a roller coaster. And again, that was a senior person. So you're going to be seeing this from lots of people. It's going to be really awkward and potentially overwhelming. The 2 meters for people is going to be socially awkward. We are social creatures. We want to come and interact with one another, give out high fives. Some people want hugs, some want to shake hands. And now we've got this barrier between us. In our culture, about 0.8 of a metre we generally interact with. Sometimes you get people a wee bit closer, some slightly further away. But generally about 0.8 is about where most conversations will take place. We're not going to have that. We're going to have 2 meters. So that's going to be awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable. And you would have seen some people. So that's okay. It's again, that's being open to that, making space for it. Some people are going to be really optimistic, and they're going to be excited, and they're going to be thrilled about getting back to work. And that's really cool. And they're going to be experiencing, or they might not, anxiety. They may be stressed about being back to work. And again, some of the comments which are really neat, the observation already that some people are less motivated. They're in this pattern. There's some nice ACC data from about 20 years ago. And what it showed was, and I can't remember the absolute stats, so hopefully somebody can correct me on this, but what it showed was if you had LBP, so low back pain, which often turns into chronic, if you were off for a week, you had something like a 98% chance of getting back to work. If you were off for a month, that dropped down to 80%. So that's a massive decline, 80%. If you were off for 3 months, that went down to something like 30 or 40%. I can't remember the stats, but it's really low. And think of those people that might be off for about 7 weeks. If you notice the difference between the people who are off for a week and the people who are off for a month, it's not the physiology that was shifting and changing. It wasn't that these people suddenly got better. It was this, it was the mindset. And in the mindset of, I'm just slowed down and I'm in that, not holiday mode, but I can just take all day to do stuff. So what people are experiencing with that, that's going to be quite normal if you've been off for a month and you haven't been working with people and you haven't been on a timetable. Now, the good news about this is that overall, I think this is going to be short term. Humans have a wonderful ability to adapt to their environment and to their normality. If you take astronauts, you know, with deliberate attention and planning and a whole lot of science, astronauts can successfully live in space, and this body was not designed to live in space, so we can adapt to that rapidly. If you think back to your Christmas break, and then when you started back, about 3 or 4 days into it, most people sort of asked, what holiday? I don't remember the holiday. And it was only a few days ago. So I think for most people, by next week, by the end of next week, they will have adapted to being back at work. So I think a lot of these problems will resolve themselves. So I've got some suggestions coming up because you still want to pay deliberate attention to it. But this week then is really important for allowing that discomfort, allowing that anxiety, letting people know that it's absolutely normal. Again, I think I shared a fortnight ago, whatever you are experiencing, and whatever anyone on your site or workplace is experiencing is normal. So it's absolutely normal. So I think this week and the next few days are for allowing space for that, but also starting to develop and deliberately develop those new processes that you're doing for the new way of working and raising the bar, because as each day goes by, certainly by next week and each week goes by, that focus and that pendulum is going to constantly shift back to productivity. And I'd suggest that some of this stuff might become less deliberate. So we want to be really focused on that. So this week, I think you've got a really neat opportunity to raise the bar and to not only implement the changes that you're having of the new way of working together and new way of doing things, but also what are the things that you might opt into and say, we did this, 6 weeks ago. Is that the right way to do it? Is there a better way? So you can opt into that. So I think that's really a really neat opportunity. One of the other things or areas I would suggest is the focus. For the leadership focus, I think there's going to be 2 main areas of focus over the next few days. And the first is connection. The first is connecting with people. The second is those new processes, the 2 metre distance, so the distancing, the hygiene, and the tracing. I think if you, and you'll notice, you're going to hear me say the word deliberately quite a few times, because if there's one word or one concept I would suggest you take from everything I say today, it's about being deliberate. If you are deliberate, it's going to take you in the right direction. But if you deliberately invest your focus this week in those 2 things, connection and processes, I think you're actually making an investment in next week and beyond that in terms of the culture that you're setting up and in terms of your productivity. And those 2 just go hand in hand. So focus on connection, focus on your processes, and then productivity will come. So I'll come to that a wee bit later. So connection, people are going to want to share and connect. We're a social creature. We are an absolute social creature. If you look at the worst prisons in the world, the ones where people are isolated, you look at the supermaxes in the States, what do? They isolate people. So they don't allow them to talk or interact with others. They don't allow them to be with others. And they don't even have any physical contact. So even when their food's given to them, there is no physical contact. This is the type of being we are. And this is a human yearning from the day we're born, or prior to even being born. So when people are coming back, they're going to want to be connecting. Now, I think you want to have a balance on that. I don't think you want to just say it's a chat fest for the next few days because you're at work and there's stuff to do. The same time is this connection is so important, and people are going to be doing, as I said, in these awkward conditions of how we do it with 2 metres when normally we're used to 0.8 of a metre. How do we do that? But I would allow people time to do that. People are going to want to share stories. Those of you from Christchurch will recall all of this from the earthquakes. Everyone had a story and everyone wanted to share their story and everyone wanted to share stories. And this is really important. It may seem like a waste of time for you at the moment. You may be looking at your productivity and going, oh, and there's an urge there. Though this is really, really important. If you invest in this now, this will pay dividends later. I'll share soon too that one of the key leadership behaviours is going to be listen, listen, listen. So when you're connecting with people, focus on that listening skill. I think you've got a really neat opportunity at the moment as well. We often talk about health and safety, and it's this thing that sits over here and it's an annoying thing. But at the moment, looking after people has been the whole focus over the last month. The whole country's been shut down to save lives. And so I think when you connect, you can tie that story in and saying that we're all important here and you're important. You know, the whole country shut down. This is really important here to look after each other and connect. The stronger that connection, the stronger people are about looking after themselves and looking after others. Some really neat data on this. The more we can connect, the more we're likely to look after one another, which means those processes that could be compliance driven, you can actually get much easier to get them values driven from a values perspective. The other thing I'd suggest is, if you can, create humour. You're back at work, you're able to joke, and again, that's part of that connection. And look for light opportunities, or look for opportunities to have those light moments, to see if you can get some of those. The new process, I'm going to talk about that in communication, because I think that's going to be an absolute focus of how you communicate and what you communicate on, and it's going to be those processes. Visible leadership. As a leader, I think, if possible, if you can get out on site, again, this is going to be a massive investment this week, both in terms of time for you, but it will pay dividends. The more you can get out on site this week and be seen and be visible, this will impact your effectiveness not only now, it's going to impact your effectiveness on the future. And it's going to demonstrate, if nothing else, that you care. And it's going to allow you to have some of those interactions and connections with people. I think that's a key thing this week. Again, people view this as something addition. I would be getting outside. I was speaking with somebody yesterday, a senior person, and I said, put it in your diary. And don't schedule half an hour, an hour. This is several hours. This might even be half your day, if you can manage that, for the next few days. Put it in your diary, and that's when you're out, and then you may be back. Otherwise, the day is going to run away from you and you won't get there, and this opportunity will be lost. This is about visibility. There is a massive difference either now and in the future. When you send an email or have a communication, people are going to remember now whether or not you just sent them emails, or whether or not you were out and about with them and you were interacting and you were modelling with them. Because I think the modelling is going to be really important. The reality is you're not going to be able to model behind a computer. You can model some behaviours with people. If you think of a ski, and I always love the analogy of a ski instructor, who do you want to model off? What sort of ski instructor? Do you want the ski instructor who's sitting back at the lodge, sipping a drink, says, I'll see you at the end of the day, and by the way, I'll send you some texts or some emails throughout the day? Or do you want the ski instructor that says, here I am, follow me, follow the path that I'm going, join me? Again, which one has the most impact? A couple of key things that I think you want to be modelling as well is that calmness that I mentioned before. As a leader, what you model, others will follow. Some of you have seen me do this before, and I pinched this off actually Blake Kyle, so he'll, those of you at SiteSafe will know this one. What I just invite to do, and again, nobody's around, just have a look at nobody else is around, and if there is, you can all do this together. Just hold, make a circle with your finger up like that. So just make a circle and imagine there's a line down your body. And now put that finger, that circle on your forehead. Now do it on your nose, now on your cheek. If you did this, I would suggest 90% of you put it on your chin, even though I said your cheek. You believe what you see, not what you hear. What you as a leader model at this moment, others will follow. Again, another great reason to be out on site. So if you model the calmness, I'd also suggest modelling the awkwardness. I mean, this is awkward if we have 2 meters, and how do you do it? And we do that, well, we can't even do that now. We can't shake hands. Model that. Model to go and say hello to someone, then model, gosh, how do I say hello to you? Am I interrupting? What's the distance? That is an absolutely brilliant way to build trust. And it models that if it's okay for you to be a bit awkward as a leader, then it's okay for others to be awkward. If it's okay for you to feel a bit anxious and a bit unsure about that, then it's okay for others. But then you can also, because now you're modelling the openness, what you also then model is the deliberateness. Right, we can't do this. Right, what's the procedure here? How do we interact? How do I interrupt? What's the work? How can we have a conversation? So now you can model some of that as well. You can model empathy. I mentioned that at the start. Model the empathy, and I'll share with you some things that you might, some conversations that you might have to generate that empathy. We also know that if you model empathy, and again, as a leader, and the more effective you are as a leader, the more impact this will have. The more that you model empathy, the more likely it is that you get it back. The more you model empathy to this person or to this team leader or to this leader over here, it is much more likely that they will then model that to their staff. And again, that's going to be much more effective out on sites getting back. Model a realistic optimism. For me, I see the sun's coming, it's not a train. However, there's still some challenges. You look at, there are politicians around the world, and you know who they are, who have had unrealistic optimism. It's all going to be great, it's going to be fine. That's disconnected people. What it also does is it diminishes what they're experiencing. If somebody's feeling anxious about the future, and you go, it's all going to be fine, don't worry about it, you've just diminished and invalidated what they're experiencing. And it doesn't build that trust and connection. In fact, it'll remove that connection. Again, if you're out on site and modelling and interacting with people, that's going to allow others to do that, and do that in a considered way in the new environment. So once you've got your processes of how and you've decided what they are, of how to interact, you're modelling that is the first step on others doing that. A lot of the questions were, how do we get people to do this? The first step is to do it yourself. If you don't do it yourself, you're going to have massive issues. So be an absolute role model for the processes that you have in place for the distancing and other things that are going on. Gandhi had a statement which I absolutely love, and he said, become the change you want to be. You're going to have change in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks that you're heading towards. You model that right now, and that's going to help you in that direction. Next thing, communicate. Communicating effectively, I mean, I essentially could call this coaching. I think this is going to be, again, one of a really critical skill over the next few days. And I'm going to focus on interpersonal communication, because I think that's where if there's a bit of magic, that's where it is. That being said, whatever communication you have, if you look at the leaders around the world who are currently admired, who are being listened to, and again, those that have been ostracised, it's all about their communication. There was a study done back in the 90s, and those of you who have heard me talk will hear me talk about this, because there's no silver bullet for being successful back out on site and doing everything. There's no silver bullet. But if there is one, I think this is as close to it as you can get. So there was, and this I want to quote the study, because if you take the findings of this and apply it to yourself, I think you can achieve some pretty remarkable outcomes. There was a study done, so what they did is they were looking at kids who weren't performing and kids who were performing, and essentially what these researchers did is got a whole swag of data, a whole lot of families and a whole lot of contexts, and what they found was that they could predict better outcomes, better academic outcomes. If you take that to the work, better work outcomes, better relationships, and better family culture. So again, take that to the work, better work outcomes, better work relationships, which will mean less stress, better cooperation, higher innovation, and a better culture. And there were two critical things on the interpersonal communication that they found was effective. The first was dramatically increasing the amount of talk on what was important. So I'm going to share with you what I think will be important in a moment. Well, I said that before. It's going to be the distancing and the process. It's going to be shifting on those. It's going to be looking at those. So dramatically increasing the talk on those, and then generating meaningful interactions around that. And if you can do that, I think that's where you're going to get a cultural shift and you're going to get some really good outcomes this week. That can be maintained if you continue to do this. And that's about communicating effectively. So I think there are 3 key skills to communicate effectively, and each one through that lens of empathy. So you can do these from a parrot point of view and just do them quite rigidly, or you can do them empathetically and openly. And if you do them with empathy, that's going to put this stuff on steroids. And the first of them is pinpointing expectations. I think it's going to be very clear, very important to be really clear about the specific behaviours and the specific outcomes that you want. And that's okay. Some of this is going to be directive. It's okay to have some directive language. That's absolutely fine. The directive language, whether it's compliance and whipping people, isn't so much the directive language, it's how we interact with the people and how we support those expectations. So that's okay. So it's not just okay to say we're going to have social distancing. I mean, what on earth does that mean? You're going to be pinpointing and clear. It is 2 metres, a 2-metre bubble under all of these conditions. Or here are the exceptions for where we can't, and here are the specific behaviours that we're going to engage in under those conditions. The clearer you can be to get these new processes, the clearer you are with them, the more effective you're going to be. Again, you saw this at the beginning of the cycle where people said, stay in your neighbourhood, stay in your bubble. And stay in your neighbourhood wasn't very clear. And you've seen the result of that. Stay in your bubble, that became clearer. The clearer those messages were, the more effective they were. The next thing, and again, this one here for me is probably the skill in the interpersonal, and it's asking questions. If you ask questions, that's going to build trust. If you think from a cultural point of view, there are 3 ways to engage a group of individuals. Three types of group influence. And again, take the new processes that you're trying to get up and be successful and maintain. 3 ways of doing it. The first is top down. You shall do this. You must, you have to, you need to. And it's very much top down, thou shalt. Now that's compliance. And we know with compliance there are side effects. We know people will only engage in compliance when they have to. They'll lose the meaning of why they're doing it. And the performance will drop off in a week or 2. And again, when the pendulum starts swinging back to full-on productivity, and it goes right on productivity, if you use compliance to establish and maintain these new processes, you're not going to have them going, and you're going to have problems. The opposite of top down is bottom up. Or not even bottom up, sorry, it's laissez-faire. So you do what you want to do, look after yourselves, and that's it. What we know when laissez-faire occurs is that there's massive variability on how people will respond. And depending on the culture, you'll get high levels of individualism, i.e. people do what suits themselves and stuff everyone else. Again, if you think for your culture, that's not going to be helpful either. The middle ground is involving everybody. So involve everybody in the processes that you're developing, and questions are a fantastic way of doing that. So as a leader, if you're going out and asking questions, you can start targeting your audience when you do that. So you can target your direct reports, other leaders and supervisors, you can target them to generate an influence or an indirect influence on others. So you can't touch everybody, but if you can touch the key influencers or the other leaders, they're going to touch these people. So you can indirectly influence these people by targeting these people and modelling those behaviours. You can target people remotely. And I won't cover that today because we're looking at back on site. And you can target individuals on site. So you can have interpersonal interactions with people on site. you can target areas of focus, and I would be incredibly deliberate about this. It's not just a case of, management by wandering around. No, this is being out, and I'm going to target certain leaders, and I'm going to target certain individuals, and I am going to have a focus. And these are I think, the generic areas of focus that you might consider this week. The first is connection, empathy. Can I just connect with my staff again? Can I interact with them? And that way you can tie that into values. Great, isn't it great to be back at work? How are you doing? And I'll share some questions in a minute. You can target your area of focus on social distancing. So the 2 meters, you can target that. Now remember I said before, the 2 critical factors: increase the amount of conversation and make it meaningful. If you increase the amount of conversation on social distancing, you dramatically increase that conversation and you make it meaningful, you will get a shift. I haven't seen any contradictory data anywhere. You will get a shift. You can target innovation. And again, you can use questions to do this. You can start looking at innovation and you can start looking at productivity improvements. And I would suggest in the coming days, so I suggest that's not your initial focus. If I turn up to someone and say, how are you? Haven't seen you for a month. How's your productivity going? Phew, you've just lost them. Now that demonstrates I don't care, I'm not interested, and I'm only interested in one thing. If I can connect on the others, and then potentially, either in that conversation or another one, saying next week or in a couple of days, we're looking at ramping up productivity, and I'm really interested in what ideas you've got. Now we've got a joint purpose. So let me just share the screen again. And here are some questions that you might want to ask. Some of these questions, I've just brainstormed some of these. There we go. I've just brainstormed some of these, so you may have some other questions. These are not the right questions. These are just simply prompts. These are just ones that you might have a go at. And I'll be really curious either in the chat box or elsewhere to put some of your questions in, because I'm sure you could actually have some better questions than me. The key thing I think, as I've just put up the top, is to generate those meaningful conversations. If you're open to the context you're in and you're deliberate about asking questions, you're curious and you have empathy, pretty much any question will do. It's going to be almost impossible not to have a meaningful conversation if you're deliberate and curious and empathetic. I don't think you'll struggle. So here are some active questions. I've put them in 2 categories, active and passive. So active are for the individual. What are they going to do? Passive is what can we do? First, in those areas that I said you might target, you'll see these target different areas. How are you doing? That's an empathy question. How are you doing? And I'm just connecting. How are you doing? How was your lockdown experience? Whatever language you want to use. So now we can have some shared experiences. Again, if you're a leader, people think you're up there and you're there. We're trying to get conversations going at that level. What was your experience? And just listen to the answer. How are you feeling about being back at work? How are you feeling? Now that one, oh, by the way, those 2 there, I call them, they're almost cracking on questions. So how was your lockdown experience as a connection? But what it also allows you to do for that question is pivot to now and what you're doing at work. If somebody says, gosh, I had a really good time and I'm struggling being back at work, fantastic. Now you can pivot and target that and see what you can do. If somebody says, oh, I've got the opposite, I was just sitting flat and now I'm back at work and I'm really excited, brilliant, you can target that and pivot to work. How are you feeling? Again, that does that. How are you doing? So that we can look at where you're at now and how can we help each other. How do you do your job with your new requirements? Get somebody to verbalise it. The sheer fact that they're answering and teaching you means when they're verbalising their answer, means that they're actually playing the rules of what they're trying to do in their head, and it makes it explicit and it makes it more likely that they'll follow that. And again, they can do it from a values-based perspective. Some of the others. How are you maintaining social distancing? Yeah. Another quick, curious one, what are you doing for lunch? How do you do that? How do you find it? That's going to be interesting. And again, you can look at that both at the interpersonal level, but also as a leader, take that and go, gosh, that person or that group's got some really neat ideas. Maybe we can share those around. And then the one here, again, you may ask that in the first one or may ask later, how can you make things even better? Is there a way to do that? How can we even raise the bar? Passive questions, what can we do? What can I do to help? How can I help? If you don't ask any other question, that's the question to ask, how can I help? Now we're here and we're interacting, we're connecting. What do I need to know that I don't? Can you tell me and teach me? Do you have any suggestions for me in the role? And then this other one, again, which is not just the individual, but raising the bar across the site or across the organisation. What suggestions do you have for other teams? What have you learned that might be helpful to others? What I'd suggest, we'll send this list out. And again, it's not an exhaustive list. They're just prompts. Use some of those questions as prompts. So I would challenge you, if you ask 2 or 3 of those questions with curiosity and empathy, I would think it's almost impossible not to have a meaningful conversation. And it would almost be impossible for you not to learn something. So hopefully that's not sharing again. Once you've asked questions, listen, listen, listen. This is going to be the superstar skill, I think. I think if you ask questions, empathetic, and you apply that OC model, and you ask questions in that manner, and you listen, that's the superstar skill. It's really hard. Listening is simple, but it's not easy. It's certainly not going to be easy when you've asked that question to lots of people throughout the time, or throughout the day, or throughout the week. It's not going to be easy when you're tired. It's not going to be easy when your mind's giving you things that you could be doing and trying to solve other problems and work that you're doing. So it is the superstar skill. If you ask those questions and listen and do that deliberately, you will be setting yourself up and the organisation up for this week, next week and beyond. As I said, it's really hard. Here's what I invite you to do. I'll just show you how challenging this is. What I invite you to do, and again, nobody's around, and if there are, you can just do this in your head, nobody will notice. What I'd invite you to do is just count to 20. That's really simple. Here's the caveat, because this is not going to be easy. Count to 20. However, the moment you get distracted, the moment your mind starts solving a problem for you, or you start to answer, or you start to do something, note what number you're up to. Okay, you ready? No one's around. So we're just going to count to 20. Really simple, but we'll see how easy it is. Count to 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, I stopped at 8. And I presume most of you have been distracted already. The reason for this is we can think probably 400 words a minute, if not more, and we speak at about 150, 180. So what do we do with that extra capacity? This doesn't like redundancy, fills in the gap. Bring your attention back, watch what happens. Another listening skill is rephrasing. So if you want people to tell you more, you can just rephrase to see that you've got that shared understanding, and just say things like, so let me see if I understand. Or what you're saying, I think this is what you're saying. Just correct me if I'm wrong here. You're getting that shared understanding. You can prompt. Tell me more about that. Oh, what happened next? Have you ever tried just repeating the last 3 words as a question? Try that. I've had whole conversations where I've done that. Just repeat the last 3 words as a question and you'll get more if the conversation is a bit stagnant. So, just repeat the last 3 words. The last 3 words, this will tell you more. Some might say, oh, it's been really tough. Been really tough. They will tell you more. A way to open things up. If you want to improve the connection, that interpersonal connection you have with somebody, regardless of the context, and this is not something to do every time. You can't do this every time. But again, be deliberate when you do this, but note the effect. After you've listened and before it's your turn to speak, take a breath. That's all you need to do, take a breath. I've often advised clients when they've been stressed or in difficult meetings and difficult contexts, just to take a breath and then watch what happens. It'll slow things down. It will allow you time to actually be present. So you can actually listen to the person and not mentally rehearse what you're going to say and have that interaction. Try that, see what happens. So again, my encouragement would be communications about the amount of talk on those targeted areas, those new processes. So if you're looking at developing new processes with distancing, and lots of the questions were about that, increase the amount of talk on it, have meaningful interactions on it, and keep those going. You're not going to do this for a few days and then forget about it. You're going to need to come back to those. And next week, as the productivity pendulum swings, you might not have the same level of interactions. They'll come down, but they won't go down to 0. They're still going to be there. A couple more minutes and let me just finish off. Yeah, well, final thing I want to talk about was productivity. I think there are going to be 2 general patterns emerging. The first is bash and crash, or goal obsession in the first week, where the first week is going to be a really high focus on productivity. Get productivity, productivity. I think those organisations or individuals will see a rapid improvement with productivity, but a really low plateau. So I think you're going to see a low plateau, or you're going to see another pattern, which is a rapid improvement and then a roller coaster. Whoa, we didn't pay attention to social distancing and now people aren't doing it. Let's play catch up on that. Whoa, now what are we doing with productivity? And you're going to get this roller coaster ride of trying to play catch up. And you're going to struggle because now you have to go back and fix things. The second, and this is the one that I would suggest, deliberate and steady. Deliberate and steady. We've got a saying in behaviour, if you want to speed up, slow down. So slow down in order to speed up. And I think for these organisations, what I think you'll see is you'll see a lower start, or the slant won't be as high. But then I think you'll see either an exponential curve, or you'll see the higher curve and a higher plateau. So I think if you focus on those things, that's what you'll see. Now, view each day as an experiment. You know, view each session initially as an experiment. End of smoko, end of lunch. What went well? What's working? What's not working? What improvements can we make? And again, this not only helps improve the systems and the productivity, it improves the culture because you're interacting with people. If you can improve 1% every day in 70 days, you're twice as good. Now, just take that as a metaphor. Because if you can improve every day and you're deliberate in improving every day, and you focus on improving the new processes and the way that you did things before, you've got an opportunity to raise the bar. And as I've said though, even though your initial focus might not be on productivity, don't ignore it. It's really cool. I'd have a brief at the beginning of each day and say, and I would be celebrating your achievements. I would be absolutely celebrating your productivity and your achievements, and if not, at least acknowledging them. So the first day, look at what we've done. The first week, look at what we've achieved. There might be a big milestone or a natural milestone. Target that, look at what we did and celebrate that, and then acknowledge it. And then my final comment is you're not aiming for success. Sorry, you're aiming for success, not perfection. Perfection is the killer of excellence. If you want to be successful, and do your best as often as you can, and encourage people to do their best, prepare well as you're all doing, show up and be present, so be open and be deliberate, deliver with passion and integrity, and then go home. That's a successful day. Malcolm, can I pass over to you to see if there are any questions? And I just see there's some here, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I'll run through, thanks very much, Cole. So I'll run through some of the questions that came through in last night's feedback, as well as pick up some of the ones that came through today.
Right.
So the first one's on protocols, and I just want to clarify, Cole, you've been talking about 2 metre distancing. That relates to residential sites. For commercial and infrastructure, that distancing is actually 1 metre.
Oh, brilliant.
So we just better clarify that.
Right, thank you.
But so one question that came through on protocols is the question of balancing policing protocols versus focusing on people doing the job.
So that's what I've been talking about there before. I think the first week you're going to be focusing, and I wouldn't be policing, I would be encouraging and tying into values. So I would be saying, you know, this is important because it's about looking after each other, it's about looking after people. It's not we have to do this because. It's about looking after people, it's about looking after the project or what we're working on, because if you get sick and we have to shut down, that's not good. So I would be focusing on that and have the majority of the focus on that this week, and productivity. And then I think the pendulum's going to shift. The pendulum is gradually each day, you're going to shift productivity, productivity, productivity. But slow and steady, or deliberate and steady, is going to win the race. If you only focus on productivity and the policing 1 metre or 2 metres is a byproduct, you're going to have that roller coaster in a few weeks' time.
This I found quite interesting, is that the question, you know, dealing with the back to normal mentality of people. So I'm presuming that means that, you know, clearly we're not back to normal, and there'll be some coming on site who think it is back to normal. So some thoughts on that.
Okay, so there's no back to normal. And the back to normal today is going to be different from tomorrow, going to be next week. That's why that O2C, the first bit is being open, and part of the open is what is the context I'm currently in right now, and what might it be coming up. And again, that's part of that massive variability. You're going to have an extension, I guess, of what some people had going into this. Some people 4 weeks ago was thinking it was Armageddon, it was the end of the world. Other people at the other extreme going, why are we bothering about this? This is just absolutely nothing. You're going to have that on site, that variability. So if you can interact and get a meaningful interaction with that person, I would suggest not getting caught in the content and arguing whether or not they're right or you're right. You're not going to win that one. It's not going to happen. What I would do is say, from where they're at, how can I help that person be part of this culture and contribute and be safe and be productive?
Anxiety came through a lot, and perhaps if I just sort of capture some of those. You know, staff with anxiety of jobs despite immediate stability. I guess that sort of talks about everybody who had a job on a site prior to the lockdown, of course, has a job after the lockdown. But you know, everyone, they'll be concerned about what happens after this project. Does my company, my employer, have another project to replace it? So that's one that came through. Staff concerned by the future, and also really quite a good comment here, thinking about anxiety. Those who are new to site, some call them new starters. I'm presuming new to site because they'll already be nervous, and now there's additional reasons to be anxious and nervous. So comments on that.
So the anxiety is going to be normal, and I would again make space for the anxiety. So again, telling someone not to worry, that's not going to help. That's not going to be useful. It's acknowledging where they're at and then helping them engage in what are the behaviours. So if you're anxious now, okay, that's normal. So I was sharing that. That's absolutely normal. And I'll be saying, thanks for sharing that. Thanks. Again, as a leader, I'd be modelling it. I'm a bit anxious. I mean, is there anyone on this call at the moment who hasn't had a little bit of anxiety over the last month? I don't think there'd be anybody. So this is normal.
I definitely have.
I had the first time, like, oh, you know, what's happening? What am I going to do? I've had that. That is absolutely normal. So I think there are two things you can do. First, again, O2C, be open, right? Let me be open. that I'm feeling anxious, and that's okay. As a leader, thanks for sharing that. That's really helpful, and it's okay. Then you can pivot. So you can take a pivot. And again, those of you who attended the session a fortnight ago, what was that compass direction for that person? And then what are the deliberate actions we can take now? So you're feeling anxious. What are the actions we choose to do now? Well, actually, I'm focusing on the job, right? Well, if you're feeling anxious, how safe are you feeling right now? Well, I'm not, right. So let's be deliberate in what the actions are you choose here. For some of the anxiety, they're not going to be able to control it. What my company does, what's occurring, what's happening there. Not going to be able to control that. So for that, it's making space. And it's right, what is the information that the company can give you at the moment? So I would be saying deliberately, what is the, and I won't say what's the cause of it, it's not what's the trigger, and can I do something about that? You know, often financial's a thing. I was in a workshop the other day and lots of people, there was the financial one. Well, is this helpful to me at this moment as I'm working? Possibly not. Is it helpful later? Might be. And then deliberately later, what am I deliberately going to do? Well, I'm going to phone the bank up. I'm going to phone the council up. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to get budgetary services. But now I've got options and I can deliberately do those to move forward, not get rid of the anxiety, to move forward. There's some really interesting data out. I don't think I shared this last time in terms of anxiety, where if you do a whole lot of stuff to reduce the anxiety, anxiety will go down, but then it will bounce back up and come back up, and you won't move forward. So if you reduce the anxiety, you're not going to phone budgetary services or the bank, because guess what? Phoning budgetary services or the bank, I presume, is going to increase anxiety. So if you're trying to get rid of that, it's not going to help you move forward. Counterintuitively, it's about moving forward. The data for that shows that the trajectory or the intensity of the anxiety is a bit less, but the bounce back is much lower. And further down the track, those people are much further ahead. So my 2-minute summation on anxiety, we could spend all day on that one, is what's important to you and head in that direction. Hopefully that answers that, Malcolm. And you're still on mute, Malcolm, so if you could unmute, that would be great.
So in terms of an external to site pressure, this has come up a couple of times. I'm just conscious when I got about another minute, so this will be the last question. So, you know, won't come through a couple of times about clients. One of the questions, client demands. Our project was only 10 days short. On completion now it's going to be 20 days, and so there's some pressure there. Another comment here, clients are trying it on in terms of cost and delays. So they're external to the site. And another one here was about grumpy neighbours. So they're busy working at home because they're not back on at work per se, doing it remotely like I am, like you are. And so there's those external pieces as well. We've only got 1 minute, so a quick wrap up on that. Okay, so the grumpy neighbour, I'm going to be a grumpy neighbour because we're going to have a construction site outside our house back up probably tomorrow, I imagine. So from my perspective, it's about being open. Again, from their perspective, if there are grumpy neighbours, if they came and interacted, i.e. I would go and interact with the neighbours and say, sorry about the noise, what can we do? And I'll be having interactions with them. These are issues that you had before, but you're right, they're amplified because now people are working at home. So I'd be going and having an interaction, as uncomfortable as that is. That's going to be much better. The stronger you can build the relationship, the more influence you're going to have. Those external factors, if it's the individual who's interacting with those, I'll begin from a values-based perspective. If a client's trying it on, or there are different times, from a values-based perspective, what can we do to help move the project forward? And it might be being open to the client. Yes, it was 7 days, but now it's 20. Let's be open to that. So you're going to change the conversation from a what to a how. How do we either decrease that, or how can we work effectively given that's what we're dealing with? So shift from a what to a how. And you're on mute again, Malcolm, so you got to unmute. Lovely. We've hit 1 o'clock, and I'm conscious that we've got 1 o'clock government announcement for COVID-19. So thank you all for attendance, and thank you very much, Kyle.
Great.
And we'll catch up again soon.
Great, thank you.